What's going on, football fans? It's your boy, Gsluke, with our DFS and prop preview for week 6 of the NFL season. Gonna get you ready for all of your exposure on Sunday with a look at the Draftkings slate and what I'm doing with my DFS lineups. That'll include my top stacks, 3 game environments that I'm getting well over the field on, and then on the pick'em and the prop side, that's what we'll focus on the second half of this video with our Underdog and Prize Picks exposure that I've already entered, and a couple slips that you might want to tail yourself for some of that Sunday exposure. But by the end, you'll have a good game plan for everything that you're entering. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get this thing started with a look at those top stacks for DFS. Stack number 1 that we've got is going to be Dak Prescott and the Cowboys, and they're playing against the Carolina Panthers, one of the worst defenses in all of the NFL, and this is expected to be one of the higher scoring games as well. It's in the high 40s, 47.5 points in most of those major books. All of the game stacks, all the game environments that we're about to go through here are in that top tier of games, so that's really the idea that we have. And I'll say, without a lot of chalk at running back and wide receiver this week, you can take on a little bit more ownership at quarterback, unlike the last couple weeks where there were some 20-30%ers at running back, even some wide receivers that were 15 to 20% that you could use for your value plays. You don't really have that so far, and that's not to say that over the next day or so we don't have some obvious value that opens up, but as of right now it looks like you can play a little bit more ownership at this position. And a Dak Prescott at 6.8%, I wouldn't call him low owned, but towards the top end of the pricing, he's certainly not chalk either. You've got guys like a Herbert that is over 12% ownership, a Daniel Jones, a Drake May over 10%. In fact, a Daniel Jones will be one of the few quarterbacks that we mentioned here during this video, but at 6.7%, as long as you're pairing him up with some reasonable stacking options, maybe a buyback that's sub 15%, you're looking at a relatively low-owned combination. So I like that for Dak. They are, of course, the favorites in that matchup. One of the highest game totals, one of the highest team totals that we have on the entire slate. In terms of stacking options, I want at least 1 to 2 pass catchers alongside with them, whether that be a George Pickens, a Ferguson, or a Tolbert at wide receiver. Worth noting that CeeDee Lamb is going to be out once again. Same thing with Turpin at wide receiver. So that's going to concentrate that wide receiver usage onto players like a Pickens and a Tolbert, and onto that tight end position with Jake Ferguson. So I think if you're going to stack that team, it makes them even more attractive when you don't have as many bodies to get that production, because if Dak Prescott goes for 25 to 30 fantasy points, 1 to 2 of these players are probably going for 20 plus points as well. So that's why I'm going with at least 1 to 2 pass catchers alongside with them. With the buybacks, you've got a Dowdle, a McMillan being your elite tier options, but I'm not forcing in a buyback. And though I will have some Bryce Young lineups, he's somebody that I only want with at least 1 pass catcher in every single build. He does have a little bit more rushing upside than a Dak Prescott does, and at $4,800, he doesn't need to have a 25 to a 30 point performance to pay off that kind of price tag. It could be a little bit more modest in that low 20 range, perhaps be that little bit of value that it opens up elsewhere that makes him a player that you have to have for the optimal lineup. I'll have both sides of the game, but the Dak Prescott, especially with that concentrated usage on the offense, is the more attractive in my opinion. The next stack we're going to go through is going to be one of the also highest totals that we have, and that's going to be Daniel Jones and the Colts going against the Kyler Murray-led Cardinals. The Kyler Murray-led Cardinals are also an attractive stacking option, but I do prefer the Daniel Jones side just a little bit more, and he's going to have all of his pass catchers available. You've got a Pittman, a Downs, a Warren, also an Alec Pierce will be returning from injury. You got Jonathan Taylor out of the backfield, who's been catching a few more balls this year as compared to the last few years. And on the other side of things, a whole bunch of buyback options, whether that be a Marvin Harrison Jr., a Trey McBride, a Michael Carter, who will be their lead back once again at running back. I'm not getting all the usage though. You'll see a DeMarcado mixing in there, a few other backs that they have active, but you've got a Michael Wilson, a Zay Jones should be active at the wide receiver position as well. There's a lot of options on both sides of this, but because both of them have rushing upside, similar to a Bryce Young, you don't have to have 2 pass catchers in every single case. I would say as long as you have at least 1 pass catcher alongside with them, if they're going to get to 20 to 25 fantasy points, it's not typically going to be only their rushing usage that gets them there. That's why I want a stacking option in most cases, but with a buyback, I also want that in most cases. This is an extremely high total, 2 competent offenses, and although the Cardinals are about 7-point underdogs, I could see it being a little bit more competitive. So I'm going to have both sides of this game. I like the rushing upside of both of these quarterbacks, and if they score a passing touchdown, a rushing touchdown, go for 250 yards and maybe 50 rushing yards, that's how you get to 25 to 30 fantasy points. And at $6,000 or $5,700 with a Kyler Murray, that would be enough to crack open this kind of a slate. And when we take a look at the stacking options on this game, it's worth noting that like a Pickens, a Ferguson, they're getting some ownership on that first stack from before. So the stacking options you're paying up for in that kind of a concentrated offense. 12% on the Pickens, just to show you with a Ferguson, he's at 18% at that tight end position. It is not so much the case in this second stack. In fact, if we go to the wide receivers that we have in this second stack, let's sort by the opponent, Arizona, you'll see that Pittman's 12%. He's got some ownership behind him. And Alec Pierce is 1.2%. Josh Downs is only 6.3%. And the tight end Warren, he's been so good this year that he is always going to get some steam. But you can see compared to the 12% number, Tolbert's getting some ownership for the Cowboys as well. There are options to get that differentiation in there. So, and also with the buybacks, if you do go with the Daniel Jones lineup and then one of the Cardinals as a buyback, and McBride's getting ownership at the tight end position, another one of the elite tier options that you have there. But outside of McBride, a lot of these other players aren't garnering that kind of attention. Michael Carter, now that he's a little bit more expensive, he's not going to be nearly as popular as what he was last week. He was closer to 20 to 30% in most contests. Now I've got him at only 4.5% projected ownership. If you go to the wide receiver position and you choose to go that direction, let's bring up some of the Indianapolis wide against players. So you got Michael Wilson there. I more so want to take a look at our top tier option, Marvin Harrison Jr. You can see he's only 8.9% projected owned, which isn't unowned, right? But compared to some of the other players around him, he's lower owned than a Pittman. He's lower owned than a DK Metcalf, a Keenan Allen. He's almost half the ownership of a player like a Chris Olave. So if you're looking to get some differentiation in there, there are options alongside this sort of a game stack, even though the quarterbacks are going to be 10 to, in Kyler Murray's case, only 5.7% owned. So I like both sides of this game. If you want to force in the differentiation a little bit more, maybe there's a value play that opens up over the next day or so that you want to jam in alongside this game environment in general, then you could go to a Kyler Murray instead, take the 5.7% instead of the 10% plus ownership onto Daniel Jones, and make that a way that you're getting some differentiation as well. Because as I previously mentioned, both sides of this game make a whole lot of sense, and really everything we said about the attractiveness of the Colts, we can cycle over there and copy and paste for the Cardinals side as well. And then the last stack we're going to go through here is Trevor Lawrence going against the Seahawks, and this is once again a game environment where I'm going to take both sides. And in fact, Sam Darnold is the lower owned of these two quarterbacks, and he might be the better play for GPPs. But in terms of raw projection, the points per dollar projection is a lot better on a Trevor Lawrence. That's also why his ownership is up there at 9.2%. He has the rushing aspect, unlike a Sam Darnold that is much more of just a pocket passing quarterback. But at $5,400 and only 3% ownership, if you're looking to get differentiation in large field GPPs, then he's the clear option out of all these quarterbacks that we've mentioned to go out there and do so with. And this is a very close game, only a 1-point spread on a lot of the major books, close to a pick'em with the money line on either side. And as you guessed, just like the other games that we went through, a 47 plus point total. In fact, some books have this at 48.5 points, even higher than some of the other games that we've gone through, and two competent offenses on either side. And the stacking options are also ways to get some differentiation. So just to go through some of the players that you can use alongside a Trevor Lawrence, let's go ahead and do that first. You've got a Travis Hunter at only 3%. A Diami Brown is 1.6% owned. Parker Washington, 0.5% owned, but that would probably be a secondary or even a third player that you're using in that stack. Brian Thomas Jr., an elite tier option, only 9.2% owned, which isn't unowned, as we've said with a few other players in this video, but comparatively, you look at some of the other guys priced around him, he's a hair lower owned than some of those players. And then, if we go to the other side of this game and try and find the buyback options, or even if you go with a Sam Darnold-led stack, which will be the lower owned option in GPPs, the stacking options aren't super high owned. Like a Cooper Kupp is 5.6%. A Torrey Horn, who has a lot of big play upside at wide receivers, also a returner for that team, he's 0.4% owned. A JSN is getting the ownership at 16%. That's just because he's one of the better point per dollar projections that we have towards the top end of the board. But even at that ownership, he's a great projecting play. If that offense is going to get there, JSN's probably a big reason for that. And if you're going with the Sam Darnold-led stack with a 3% owned quarterback, well, that differentiation differentiation that you're getting at the quarterback position is maybe enough to go out there and splurge on a JSN at wide receiver. So that's where you're giving and taking. You're trying to get the pros and cons of these low and these high-end players into lineups. And depending on the contest you're entering, you need to force your hand the bigger the contest it is. And, the smaller the contest, the less differentiation that you need. And in those smaller contests, that's where I would really like a Trevor Lawrence stack, at least one pass catcher, probably two in some cases. Lawrence does have some rushing upside, but he also has a lot of passing upside as well. So that's why I still have it as 1 to 2 pass catchers. But if you want to use JSN as your buyback and a single entry or a smaller field GPP, then so be it. You can take those sometimes guys that are 15 to 20% owned because you're only playing against 200 to 500 other entries, and your chance of duplicating yourself is minuscule. It's peanuts compared to the large field GPPs, and your need for leverage to move up on those leaderboards is peanuts compared to what you have in those large field GPPs. So those are a few game environments that I'll be getting over the field on. Like I mentioned, not a lot of value at this current moment at wide receiver or running back, but that's not to say that that doesn't open up over the next day or so. So to download the sheet with all my up-to-date projections with every single player that I have in my player pool, make sure to check out my Patreon page, link down below to go ahead and join the NFL DFS tier. And for $15 a month, you get access to all these spreadsheets that I have for main slate every single week and also Showdown. And now for the pick on the prop side, where you might want to consider tailing these two slips for your Sunday exposure. So first off, I got this 2-man on Underdog, which pays 3.04x. It's a little bit of correlation between these two spots if it ends up being a high-scoring game. And considering that this is one of the highest totals that we have of all the games on Sunday, I think it's a pretty reasonable ask. And with Kyler Murray, he's at 219.5 yards on a lot of major books, and even up at 224.5 yards on FanDuel. So you're talking about a 10-yard value compared to that line, a 5-yard line difference compared to a lot of the other major books as well, and they're 7-point underdogs, so you would expect them to be in pass first mode for a lot of that game. Kyler Murray did bang himself up a little bit towards the end of last game as well. It was looking a lot more pass heavy than rush heavy in that sort of scenario, so I would expect him to air it out, especially in that second half in a negative game script. And the other side of this, we've also got line value on Tyler Warren, and though it is an over on receptions, so not necessarily like an over on rushing attempts, which would really correlate to them leading by 7 points, but we're more so going for the shootout script here, a high scoring game, getting into that high 40s or maybe even the 50s with that total. And at 4.5 receptions, he's minus 144 for his over on FanDuel. And a lot of the other major books have him about minus 130 towards the over. Would not surprise me if this had a multiplier on it very shortly on a site like Underdog, or even ended up a goblin prop over on the Prize Picks side. So I'm going to take it at even money right now, especially for over a 3x payout between these two. And though it's not an onslaught game script like we sometimes do with a lot of these props, sometimes you go for the shootout game script, close competitive one where both offenses are relatively efficient. And for a slightly boosted payout, I'll take that all day on a site here like Underdog. So that's what we're doing with that first 2-man. And then on the Prize Pick side, we've got this 2-leg as well. And this is an uncorrelated slip, just 2 prop leans that I wanted to mix in that I have as value for Sunday. So the first is going to be this Hunter Henry, which is at 3.5 receptions. On FanDuel, he's nearly minus 140 towards his over. And just like we had with the last lean, he's minus 130 or more odds on most of the major spots. So another prop that I would see a multiplier on very shortly on a site like Underdog. You could also see him bump on a site like Prize Picks here over the next day or so. And the matchup makes a whole lot of sense. The Saints defense has been susceptible against opposing tight ends. And in general, Drake May and that offense has been extremely efficient this year. And though the last couple of weeks he's only managed to get 2 receptions, they've been extremely wide receiver heavy, which is kind of unlike that Patriot offense, normally spreading it around a little bit more. And Hunter Henry did have a game of 8 receptions just a few starts ago. And on books, him having all of that juice towards the over kind of tells the story. The matchup, the fact that it's been a little bit of an outlier the last couple of weeks could mean that he's due for that regression this week. And as such, I'll take his over at 3.5. So a little bit of line value. And on the other side of this, a little bit of line value too on Sterling Shepard, who is minus 130 towards his over in a lot of the major books. You have Mike Evans out, also Chris Godwin, who won't be playing on Sunday. You also have Tampa Bay that are pretty sizable underdogs against the 49ers, and it has to do with their injuries. They've got a Bucky Irving hurt, and they're not massive underdogs, but they are slight underdogs against the 49ers side, which have plenty of injuries to be dealing with themselves. So I like Sterling Shepard to get plenty of targets, a lot of that due to his increased snap share. He was only playing about 40% of snaps last week, but that was with Godwin playing 77% of them. So with Godwin out, Mike Evans still sidelined. You have Ibuka, who's going to be that number 1 wide receiver, but number 2 wide receiver is going to be Sterling Shepard. And considering that Baker Mayfield and his passing attempt line is in the middle 30s, I would expect a lot of those targets to go to a Shepard. He fits that Godwin role quite well. He's gone over this 3.5 line, by the way, in 3 of his first 5 games so far this year, so 60% hit rate. And now he's going to have the biggest role that he's had of the entire season. So I would argue that he's got an even better chance than that to go out there and hit this sort of line for us, alongside some line value with Hunter Henry. So that's a 3x payout on Prize Picks because it, of course, is uncorrelated. And then the first one for 3.04x over here on the Underdog side. There will be more pieces of exposure that I get to by Sunday, so make sure to check out my Patreon page for all of that. A couple of other steps that are actually already posted there, so if you want to tail everything I'm taking for Sunday, that is the place to check it out. But that's all I've got, guys, for this DFS and prop preview. I hope you guys have all the best of luck for everything that you're entering, whether it's in the large scale GPPs or with any prop exposure that you're going with as well. It's cash out. Let's make it a profitable one and enjoy the process as well. Best of luck with everything. Go ahead, smash that like button if you guys haven't already as well, and also subscribe to the channel so you don't miss anything that drops in the future, including our main slate breakdowns every single week, our showdown breakdowns for all the island games that we have this season as well. And also comment down below who you've got as the top scorer for the Sunday main slate for a chance to earn a free month on my Patreon page. And if you end up getting the top raw scorer correct, you will win a free month access to everything that I have on the Patreon, including those props like we were just mentioning before, but also the spreadsheets that we have for main slate and for showdown for every single island game throughout the entire rest of the year. So go ahead, enter that giveaway if you guys haven't already. Smash that like button as well. And until next time, I hope to see you guys towards the top end of those contests, and let's make Sunday a good one.